They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose your peace. I thought I had the day I bought that house in Laconia. Quiet street, faded green shutters, a porch that faced the sunrise. It felt like breathing after years underwater. I was 46, a financial analyst with more spreadsheets than friends, freshly divorced, and aching for something clean, something mine. I didn't even make it 2 weeks before the first suitcase landed at my door. It was my sister, tear-streaked, mascara dragging down her cheeks, holding onto a floral print suitcase like it was the only solid thing in her life. She said she just needed a place to land. A few days, tops. She'd figure it out. I wanted to believe her. Maybe I needed to. I gave her the guest room and made space in the fridge. I even offered to drive her to interviews, just like old times. Only she never went to one. Not really. Instead, she curled into the couch in the silence, like a cat that found a warm window. For days later, my parents arrived. Not with a visit in mind, no. They pulled up with a folding chair, 2 big plastic containers, and a look that said we're staying. My mother brought her slow cooker. My father brought his opinions. They said it would be temporary, just a little family reset. But you can smell permanence in the way people unpack. The way my dad hung his coat by the door. The way my mom organized the pantry like it was hers. The way my sister started calling the house home. And I slept on the couch. My house, my mortgage, my chipped blue coffee mug. All of it slowly evaporating under their presence. I told myself I was being generous. That it was fine. That I owed them. But the truth crept in at night, when the television glowed in the guest room, the one I used to call my bedroom, and I stared at the ceiling, counting cracks I hadn't noticed before. That was the start. The piece I bought didn't last long. But the real betrayal, the kind that hardens you, came with a legal envelope I didn't expect. I found the envelope buried in a pile of junk mail. It was cream-colored, thick, the kind that whispers important even before you tear the seal. I opened it on autopilot, expecting a tax notice or a reminder from the town council. What I got instead felt like a sucker punch. It was a letter from a local attorney. A friendly notice, he called it, informing me that a petition had been filed by my parents and sister. A formal request to establish shared residency rights due to ongoing cohabitation and financial interdependence. I remember reading that sentence 3 times, thinking I must have misunderstood. But no, they were claiming that since they had been living in the house, contributing in non-financial domestic capacities, they had a legal claim to stay. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, heart pounding, the letter trembling in my hand. My mind spun back to the slow cooker simmering away in my kitchen, my sister's stack of laundry on my machine, my father adjusting the thermostat like he paid for the oil. All of it suddenly made sense. They hadn't overstayed. They'd settled in. I had been too tired, too polite, too conflict avoidant to question it. That was always my flaw, mistaking endurance for kindness. I thought I was being a good son, a good brother. They thought I was a fool with a house they could quietly turn into theirs. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I sat in my car parked at the edge of Opechee Park, staring at the lake that never quite froze, thinking about how silence becomes complicity, about how we let people take pieces of us until we forget what was ours to begin with. And that's when I knew they weren't going to leave, not unless I made them. The next morning, I didn't speak a word. I made coffee. I watched the sunrise over the porch railing like I used to, back when that moment felt like mine. My mother asked if I was feeling okay. I nodded. My father mentioned the thermostat was acting up again. I said I'd look into it. My sister asked if I could pick up oat milk the next time I went out. I nodded again, sipped my coffee, and left. But I didn't go to the store. I drove straight to the Laconia law offices, the same ones that had sent me the letter. I asked to see the attorney named in the document. He wasn't in. Of course he wasn't. So I left a message with the receptionist, tell him I got the letter, and tell him I'll see him in court. The next place I went was a locksmith. It took 2 hours and $300, but I walked out with a new set of keys and the quiet resolve of someone who's done being polite. That evening, I told them I was going out of town for work. I even packed a small bag, made it believable. My mother said to drive safe. My sister asked if I'd be gone long. My father didn't look up from the couch. I left, checked into a cheap motel 15 minutes away, ate a sad turkey sandwich from a gas station, waited until midnight. Then I drove back to my house. The locks turned like butter. Clean. Final. I left a note taped to the inside of the glass door. Contact my attorney. Do not attempt to re-enter. It took less than 5 minutes. Years of resentment collapsed into one quiet moment of clarity. The next morning, my phone buzzed. 22 missed calls. 9 voicemails. One picture of my sister crying on the porch. My mom had messaged, "Jake, please. This is cruel. Cruel? Cruel was pretending I didn't exist while they built a life in my home. They didn't come back right away. I think they expected me to cool off like I always had. The same way I did when my sister totaled my car in high school. And my parents blamed me for being too generous. The same way I did when they forgot my birthday 2 years in a row, but still asked if I could help with their taxes. But this wasn't a tantrum. This was a boundary. On the third day of silence, I got an email from their lawyer. A mediation offer. It was almost laughable. They were willing to vacate the property if I provided a 3-month financial cushion and assistance in relocating. In other words, pay us to leave the house we invaded. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to my attorney and went for a long drive. Somewhere past Meredith, on a back road that smelled like pine and diesel, I pulled over and just sat. My fingers gripped the steering like it could anchor me to something real. I didn't cry. Not exactly. But something inside me cracked. Something old. Something brittle. I'd spent most of my life being the one who held it together. The planner. The helper. The one who made room. Paid early, never raised his voice. I thought that made me strong. I thought it made me good. But maybe it just made me easy to use. My therapist once said that children of emotionally neglectful families often overfunction as adults. We become reliable to a fault, because somewhere along the way, we decided that being useful was safer than being loved. I never went back to that therapist, but I remember that line now like it was written on the inside of my skull. That night, I slept better than I had in months. You'd think a move like that, locking out your own family, would leave you riddled with guilt. But it didn't. Not exactly. What I felt was something closer to grief. Not for what I'd done, but for what I finally had to admit. They were never going to see me. Not really. There was a time, years ago, when I thought maybe if I just tried harder, called more, visited more, showed up when no one else would, they'd notice. But they'd look up one day and realize who had kept the ship from sinking. That someone might say thank you. But that moment never came. Instead, it was always, why don't you call more? After I worked 60-hour weeks. Or can you loan us a little until Friday? When I just sent money the week before. It was never, how are you doing, Jake? Just a series of withdrawals from a relationship that never replenished. That realization didn't happen all at once. It came in waves. Like the time my mom once forgot I had been promoted again, but remembered that Eric liked barbecue ribs. Or when my sister called me uptight for wanting them to text before just showing up. The small moments, the 1,000 little cuts. I started journaling, not because I'm some introspective guru, but because I didn't know what else to do with the noise in my head. Every entry circled the same question. Was it always like this? Or did it just get worse over time? I don't have an answer yet. But I do know this. I didn't change the locks because I stopped loving them. I changed the locks because I finally started loving myself. The silence didn't last forever. On the 6th day, my father showed up. Not to apologize. That's never been his style. He stood on the sidewalk like a stranger, arms crossed, expression flat, except for the twitch in his jaw that always gave him away. I didn't open the door. I watched from the upstairs window, behind the curtain. He stayed there for 12 minutes. Then he left. Later that night, he texted, "You're being dramatic. You could have just asked us to leave." But that's the thing. I had a dozen times. Not with shouting, not with ultimatums, but with gentle boundaries quietly enforced. Each one ignored. Each one brushed off as me being rigid or ungrateful. I remembered once, I must have been 11, when I told them I didn't want Eric playing with my model trains. I'd spent weeks building those tracks, meticulously, piece by piece. The next morning, the set was smashed, and my mother said I was overreacting. Boys will be boys. Let go. Even then, I'd learned something dangerous, that asking for space made me the villain. So I stopped asking. I let them inch closer and closer into my life. First emotionally, then financially, then physically, until I had a couch for a bed and strangers in every corner of the house I bought to be alone in. That was the pattern. I made myself small so they could take up more room. Not anymore. The real punch to the gut came a week later, when I got a letter from the town clerk's office. Someone, I didn't know who at first, had submitted paperwork requesting a property tax reassessment. Nothing unusual on the surface, except they'd marked the house as a multi-family residence. I stared at the form like it was a joke. But there it was, multiple units, shared tenancy, evidence of long-term occupancy by more than one adult party. It wasn't a mistake. It was strategy. They were building a case. Slowly, carefully, as if they could inch their way into legal permanence by rewriting the paperwork to match their invasion. I called the office, asked who submitted it. They hesitated, then gave me the name, my sister. Of course. I hung up and sat on the porch, the only place that still felt untouched, and stared at the yard. Brown grass, a cracked walkway, the birch tree I planted my first weekend here, back when I still believed in fresh starts. That tree looked half dead now, like it had absorbed the tension in the air and turned brittle. So I did what I hadn't done in years. I called my old friend Vince, a real estate lawyer in Manchester, told him the story, told him I needed someone who didn't flinch when family stopped acting like family. He paused a moment, then said, "Send me everything." I did. That night, I sat in the dark and realized they weren't just trying to stay. They were trying to make it, so I couldn't remove them even if I wanted to. The thing about hiring a lawyer is that it forces everything into black and white. What you feel doesn't matter. What you can prove does. Vince was methodical. He asked for utility bills, texts, emails, timestamps. Every scrap of evidence that showed I had been the sole legal owner, the only financial contributor. He warned me not to communicate directly anymore. No texts, no calls. Let them show their hand, he said. Every move they make is another receipt. I hated how clinical it felt. Like I was building a case against strangers, not blood. But maybe that was the point. By then, they felt like strangers who just happened to share my last name. The real twist came when Vince asked me to check the title on the house. Just a routine check, he said. Make sure nothing's been altered. I logged into the county record site and entered my parcel number. That's when my stomach dropped. There was a lien, a small one, filed 2 months prior, from a payday lender in Manchester. The borrower listed? My mother. But the address she used was mine. I called Vince in a cold sweat. He told me to calm down, scan the document, and send it over. A few hours later, he called me back. She used your address to secure a small cash loan, he said, which technically opens the door for them to claim some form of financial stake, if we're not careful, especially if they argue you were aware of it. I wasn't, I said. I believe you, he replied. But belief doesn't hold up in court. Documentation does. It hit me then. They weren't just camping out. They were sinking roots, one false claim at a time. A utility bill here, a loan document there, a tax form with my address. All these little paper trails leading to a trap I didn't even know I was walking into. And suddenly, I saw it all for what it was. Not a misunderstanding, not desperation, but a quiet, organized betrayal. The kind that happens in silence, in assumptions, in blank signature lines, in casual, "Oh, I'll just use your address for now," moments that seem harmless until they're not. I sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and stared at the wall. I thought of every grocery run, every broken pipe I fixed, every moment I'd chosen patience over confrontation. It all felt like a setup now. And here's the part one still haven't said out loud. Not even events. Part of me wonders if they planned it from start. That maybe this whole thing, the tears, the bags, the just a few days, was never temporary. That they knew I wouldn't say no. That they counted on it. And that thought, not the legal mess, not the lien, not even the eviction battle that was about to start. That thought was the part that broke me. Because I wanted to believe I was loved. Turns out, I was just useful. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Superior Court, Belknap County. Vince warned me not to expect resolution, just a beginning. A formal answer to the petition, a judge's review of the preliminary evidence, and the first cracks in whatever illusion they'd built. I wore the only suit I owned. Charcoal gray. The one I'd used for job interviews and my divorce mediation. Still fit, though the fabric hung differently now. Stiffer, like it remembered too much. They showed up together. My parents, arm in arm like a united front. My sister trailing just behind, sunglasses on despite the rain. She didn't look at me. Neither did they. The judge was polite, stern, old enough to see through theatrics, but young enough to still be irritated by them. Vince spoke first. Clear, calm, organized. Presented the title, the bills, the loan documents filed without my knowledge. He framed it as what it was, an overreach. A family crossing a line under the guise of need. Their lawyer was softer. Spoke about love, about dependence, about family support structures in times of crisis. He called it a miscommunication. Said I had a history of generosity that blurred the lines of intent. I almost laughed at that. Blurred lines? No, they drew them, crossed them, then acted surprised when I noticed. We didn't get a ruling that day, but the judge agreed to a temporary injunction. They couldn't return to the property, not until things were clarified. Outside the courthouse, my mother tried to speak to me. Just one word, my name. I walked past her like I hadn't heard, because honestly, I didn't know what I'd say. Anything would have sounded either too cruel or not cruel enough. On the drive home, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. I was 13. Eric had lost his backpack and blamed me, said I hid it. I hadn't, but he cried, and they believed him. My dad grounded me for a week. My mom said it hurt her more than it hurt me. Later that night, I found a backpack stuffed under Eric's bed. I didn't tell them, not because I was scared, because I already knew it wouldn't matter. That memory hit harder than any court filing, because it proved something I'd never wanted to face. This wasn't new. It just finally had paperwork. The house felt different after that. Not quieter. It had always been quiet, but empty in a way I hadn't expected. Like it was waiting to be reclaimed. Like even the walls had been holding their breath for too long. I started cleaning. Not out of necessity, but instinct. I stripped the beds they'd used, boxed up whatever they left behind. Shampoo bottles, mismatched socks, a half-eaten bag of trail mixed tucked into the sofa cushions. My sister's favorite mug, chipped on one side, sat on the counter like a dare. I threw in the trash. The guest room, once hers, I repainted. Nothing fancy, just a new coat of pale blue. I moved the old reading chair in there. Put a lamp by the window. A small act of reclamation. There's something strange about cleaning up after people who never said thank you. It doesn't make you feel powerful. It just makes the air heavier. I thought I'd feel victorious. All I felt was done. A few nights later, I had a dream. In it, I was walking through the house, only it wasn't mine anymore. Everything was gone. Furniture, paint, even the floorboards. Just dust and silence and a slow creaking under my feet. I opened the front door in the dream and stepped outside, only to find my sister sitting on the steps, suitcase in hand, crying like she had that first night. But this time, I didn't let her in. I woke up before she could speak. That morning, I sat at the kitchen table, the real one, with a cup of coffee and nothing else. No noise. No demands. No one needing something from me. And for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for anyone but myself. Not angry. Not vindicated. Just free. 3 weeks later, I got the call from Vince. It's over, he said. They've withdrawn the petition. No counterclaims. No conditions. Just gone. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Let it echo through the empty kitchen. Just gone. No apology. No explanation. Not even a last jab. Just silence. Vince said they likely realized they didn't have a case. That continuing would only drain whatever resources they had left. Or maybe, though he didn't say it, they just didn't care enough to fight once the money dried up. I thanked him, transferred his fee, hung up. Then I walked outside, stood on the porch, and stared down at the driveway where they'd once unloaded their entire lives onto mine. I half expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, some sort of exhale. But all I felt was the wind. You spend your life thinking closure will feel clean, that the end of a war means peace. But sometimes it just means you're alone again, this time on purpose. A week later, a letter came. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. My mother's. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It didn't say sorry. It didn't beg. It just said, you'll understand someday. I folded it back up. Didn't rip it. Didn't keep it either. I dropped it in the trash, turned off the porch light, and went to bed early that night. Because here's the truth they'll never admit. I do understand. That's why I locked the door. And that's why I'll never open it again.